The news had just broken that he will be back on the BBC, but there was no comment from Gary Lineker at his home this morning. Instead, he used the same platform where the controversy had begun. In a series of tweets, he said, "After a surreal few days, I'm delighted that we have navigated a way through this. I'm immeasurably proud to work with the best and fairest broadcaster in the world. I cannot wait to get back in the Match of the Day chair on Saturday."
Now on BBC One, we're sorry that we're unable to show our normal Match of the Day, including commentary tonight.
This week's programme played out without presenters or pundits after they pulled out in support of Gary Lineker, suspended after his posts criticising the government's immigration policy. Other sports programmes were cancelled too. The Director General flew back from America for crisis talks.
There's been no easy answers. It's been tough to get the balance right. But asking Gary Lineker to step aside, I think, was appropriate at that moment. Then we reset and we do the things we've laid out in this agreement, which I think are right, and we go forward.
Tim Davie blamed what he called grey areas in the current social media guidelines. He's going to appoint an independent expert to review them, with a particular focus on how they apply to freelancers outside of news and current affairs. There's a sense of relief for many that the chaos has cleared for now, but mixed analysis of how it's been played.
The BBC is 2-0 down in this contest, and Lineker's playing a blinder. Tim Davies got to reorganise his defence. He's got to bring in a new signing to look at the guidelines.
And Labour focus on the perception, denied emphatically by the BBC, that there was pressure from the government.
Clearly, the social media guidelines need looking at, but I do think this whole episode raises some much bigger questions about the relationship between the BBC, that's supposed to be impartial and independent, and with the government.
The standoff is over, but this has been a bruising episode for the BBC, and its commitment to freedom of expression and impartiality is now under more scrutiny than ever.
So Tessa joins us, as you can see, in the studio. It'd be interesting, Tessa, won't it, if this plays out without anybody actually losing their jobs anyway. Do you think this is the end of the story?
It feels like it for now, if I could use an analogy. It feels like we've got to full time now. There will be the top brass at the BBC who are incredibly relieved that sports programming is going to be back, and for the millions of viewers around the world too. But you will know, people have been talking about this. This has really cut through over the weekend. There are some people who believe that Gary Lineker should have said sorry, that he should have been disciplined. There are plenty more who believe that the BBC might have been pressured into this, although they emphatically deny that. We have to remember this is all coming at a time where the BBC chair, Richard Sharp, is subject to an ongoing inquiry over organising a loan to Boris Johnson. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. But we are talking about the BBC more, aren't we? So I say it's come to full time. I feel like there is probably some extra time to come afterwards, and we need to watch out what happens with that review. And also, let's see what Gary Lineker tweets over the next few weeks. He's already tweeted about refugees today and said he's pleased with the empathy that's been shown towards them. So certainly one to watch.
Yeah, and let's see what happens to that review as well. But it's not just one presenter the BBC's grappling with issues. Two presenters, this time at Question Time presenter Fiona Bruce. What's going on there?
Yeah, this is quite different, but this goes back to Question Time on Thursday night, and the panellist Yasmin Alabai-Brown was talking about Stanley Johnson, the father of Boris Johnson, and accusations about domestic violence against him. Fiona Bruce, the host, was subject to a social media backlash after she stepped in. Let's take a listen.
And actually, Ken, he was a wife-beater, Stanley Johnson, on record.
OK, let me just intervene. I'm not disputing what you're saying, but just so everyone knows what this is referring to. So Stanley Johnson's wife spoke to a journalist, Tom Bauer, and she said that Stanley Johnson had broken her nose and she had ended up in hospital as a result. Stanley Johnson has not commented publicly on that. Friends of his have said it did happen, it was a one-off.
Yes.
So Fiona Bruce said she was required to legally contextualise what was said and that the words are not an expression of her own opinions, but she has today stepped back as an ambassador for the domestic violence charity Refuge, who she'd worked for a number of years. They have given us a statement today. They thanked her for her considerable contribution over the years, but they've accepted her apology and offered to stand down because they said, even though they understand that these weren't her words, they said it did not reduce her impact and this minimised the seriousness of domestic abuse. So once again, the BBC and its presenters making the headlines.